Hello, lesson 6 is about the Andrews Pitchfork and how to use it. So there are two pitchforks which we use. One is the standard or the original, and the other one is the modified Schiff. So how are they derived? Well, the standard one, we always have ABC, right? We always have ABC, and the modified Schiff is where you take half of the, I'll draw it on it so you can see. You take half, so from here to here, and then you have from here to here. So all a modified Schiff is going to do is move this A leg halfway up and halfway across. I'll show you. Let's watch that box. Right? Did exactly what I said. Halfway up, halfway across. That's what the modified Schiff does. If you're curious about what a Schiff is, a Schiff will only go halfway up. It'll only put it to here. So, yep, there you go. What it is that Alan Andrews, when he was doing this course, there was a student called Jeremy Schiff who said, look, Alan, you know, I've noticed that if I pull my A leg up like this, it captures a lot of price. And then Alan did a bit of study and came back to him and says, well, try and modify it to here, and he noticed that this one was actually way more powerful. Okay, so what does a fork tell us? A fork generally tells us the relationship between three pivots. But essentially what it tells us is gives us the sine wave, right? The sine wave. What is a sine wave? Well, sine wave is something like that, right? That once the sine wave has been completed, that is the main job of the fork. However, we do keep a notice of it because this will often project the frequency of price on a swing. So we've got three components to a fork here. There's the ABC pivots or ABC lines. We call this one the median line. They're actually all three median lines, by the way, but we call this one the median line. We call this one the upper median line parallel. This one is the lower median line parallel. And if you had another deviation, this would be a warning line. This would be another warning line. This would be another warning line. And this would be warning line 1, 2, 3, and so it goes on. Okay. When price is at the median line, it's at balance. When price is at the upper median line parallel or the lower median line parallel, it's at the extreme of price. What does that mean? That means that we should expect it to run out of energy here. Run out of energy here. This one is more of a crossroads, right? Okay, so how do we use them? Okay, so when it comes to the modified Schiff, there are three situations that you want to be aware of in price when you want to use them. The first situation is if price is making a valley, right? If your two pivots are quite close together. And the second, obviously the inverse of that would be the mountain, right? This would be a mountain. So if you have, again, your two pivots are pretty close together, this would be a mountain. You use a modified Schiff in these situations. The third situation you want to use a modified Schiff is when your A line is particularly long. Okay, hopefully I'll find some examples here. So, oh, and by the way, when you have a TD box, your fork of choice is the modified Schiff. So when you first start out, just pull your ABC from the major pivots that are standing out to you, right? The extremes, right? What do I mean by that? Well, here you got a situation. What's this? This is a mountain. Just pull them from the extremes. This would be A, this would be B, and this would be C. These are the extremes. Later on, you can get into finer nuances of the fork and certain pivots you can pull from. I'll mention a couple here. But so what makes for a good fork? Okay, so what you want to look at for a good fork, look at the A line and look at the touches that are on the A line. If you have many touches, it's the same as an MPL, multi-pivot level. Think of it that way. Look at the touches on it. That can validate your fork. The other thing that'll validate a fork is that when price comes off C, if you get a test, that validates the fork. So you can see here what I said to you there, that when you have a TD box, you can use a modified shift. And look at this. This is what we call a test. Price tested the C line. That validates this fork. And if you look to see what happened at the median line, see how price stalled at it. We're detectives in price, right? As traders, we're detectives in price. So I would say that price paused there for two reasons. Number one, it's a median line of this fork. It's also a TD box, right? So, made sense to exit the short if you were short from there. There's quite a good thing to do with forks is to get nested forks, one overlapping another. They don't have to be the same, but I can see here that this fork, you can see this pivot here and this pivot here, we can regard that as a valley. And if I was to put a fork on here, it captures exactly the same frequency as the fork that was pulled from here. When it comes to determining which pivots to pull from, we do it in the same way, but there is the same way as regards major and minor, but there is another component to this that I want to share here. And that is the impulse moves that did some damage. Now, every impulse move will actually do a bit of damage because it'll take something out. So you can see from here, from this swing here, price came down. This did not break the pivot here. This one did break this pivot. On this impulse move, from here down to here, before it did the major pullback on this move, this swing from here to here, what damage did this impulse do? This took out this pivot, but it's on its own swing. It took out this one, it took out this one, it took out this one. That there, because it's on the opposing swing that went up, this here is an important place that you could consider pulling for a fork. You could use this level for a fib pull as well, for the very same reason I described there. And this is actually the that TD box there. Okay. So, yep. So that's it. So remember that. So when we look at a fork, we always want to look at the qualities of the A line for nice touches. This one doesn't have particularly nice touches, I must say. But see this? That's a nice test, which confirms this fork has been very good. There's a fork that we use. Good places to pull forks. Well, often, I'll tell you, often on, see something like this, price came down, you've got a low here, and this is a second swing back. That's a good place to pull an A pivot. Why? Because often if price was going to start in a new trend, if this was going to go higher, and you had good reasons to think it would go higher, your standard fork that you'd want to use here would be off something like that. And again, it would be the original. And what this will often do is project the swing, right? Let's see if we can find an example. Okay, we don't have one there. Don't have one there. Got one there. There's one there. Okay, so second swing back would be something like this. And what you do is you take your fork standard fork, and that would be A, that would be B, and that would be C. And can you see how this caught the frequency quite nicely before price fell out of it? And this is exactly what that fork will do. On lesson 4 I talked about the major and minor swings, but there is one other pivot which I've not discussed yet, and it's called the LSB. It's called the last swing broke, and it's an important pivot to know about. So here in this down leg, price swinging down, and then it went, this is the last drop, and it came from here. We call this the LSB. LSB, the last swing broke. Very often this measurement is going to be of interest. So if you take that swing measurement, you can see it almost repeated it there, and at some point you usually do get a repeat of the swing length on this swing. Not only that, this high becomes a key pivot to use, and what we can do is use that as an A, and this is a B, and this as a C. Now what this fork then does, it just becomes a good pivot. You can use it in that manner. So what this then becomes is what we call a pendulum pullback median line. Pendulum pullback, Tim Morge named it this, and you know, he was saying that the idea of a pendulum swings backwards and forwards. So basically prices has come from the low, comes through its 50% area. What's it going to do once it goes out to the next extreme of the swing? It's likely to pull back. So that's the idea. It's a pendulum, right? So it swings back, usually somewhere near the middle one, and then this holds price for the next move up. Specific name when you use a fork in this situation, we call that PPML, pendulum pullback median line. It's a bit of a mouthful to say, but PPML is okay. Okay, so that's it, I think. It's always nice when you can get a fork to call your trade area. So, and sometimes it needs to build its own pivot. Now, when it builds its own pivot, that's exactly what happened here. You have this fork. Obviously, that you don't know if this C pivot's going to hold, so you wait, right? And then you see it come off, and then the fact that it's responded off that area should be good enough to tell you that your sellers are there. You got a nice little red line coming up here into a TD box. Go in the test, right? Take the test. That sort of thing. Okay, I think that's pretty much it for forks. Basically. For a deeper dive into this, I suggest you study the Tim Morge PDF. Just ask me for it if you don't have it. And that'll do for this one.